in the fight for freedom.
We never forget where we come from.
Congressman McCarthy spoke about continual sacrifice, a sacrifice Kenneth Raymond, a veteran of the Korean War, knows too well. He lost both his brothers who served with him.
Bad, but they go back over, which I would myself if I could.
Hurt but proud. Veterans like 76-year-old Robert Silva say days like today force reflection.
This uniform goes back a long ways.
Days students learn about in textbooks.
It makes me, proud to live in this country.
A country where there's no shortage of sacrifice. Senator Michael Rubio, also in attendance today, says even when our fighters are gone, there is still a fight to fight.
When we have prisoners who have better health insurance than our veterans, that's simply unacceptable.
Even as we remember today, Rubio calls attention to his plan to give better care for our veterans. And in Arvin, patriotism from Henry Viza, whose dad is buried in this cemetery.
That's why we keep coming. And since he was a World War II veteran, we've just been coming every year.
Care and support in the hands of applause and in the sound of a familiar call. Paige Hansen, 17 News.
It was a unique opportunity where the entire conference got to convey what they're listening to across America. The president laid out from a debt discussion, but from the conference he heard about jobs. He heard about unshackling the burden of regulation onto small business to get them working again, from Wisconsin to West Virginia to members across the way. What I heard from this president, that he wanted to sit down and find real cuts now. He said there needed to be entitlement reform. And we will work with them towards those ends to direct where we create new jobs, put us on a new path to pay off the budget, on a balanced budget, and pay down the debt as well.
Right now, one of the Republicans who took part in today's meeting with the president would be the majority whip, Republican Congressman Kevin McCarthy of California. Congressman, thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me, and happy anniversary to CNN.
Thank you very much. 31 years, 31 excellent years. All right, let's talk about raising the debt ceiling for a moment. When all is said and done, come August, it's going to be raised, isn't that right?
Well, it's been raised all the time before, but what has to happen here is if you just go about raising the debt limit with no cuts or anywhere else, it could be a detriment to our credit and everywhere else, because those who are buying our debt, in 1970, foreign countries only owed 5% of our public debt. Today they own 47%. If people don't think we're getting our house in order, they could downgrade, and we had that warning that they could downgrade USA. So we've got to make a fundamental change in our behavior. You can't continue to borrow 41 cents out of every dollar and think you're going to continue to prosper.
Did you get a commitment from the president today that between now and August he would come up with a significant cut in spending that would enable you and your fellow Republicans to go ahead and vote in favor of raising the debt ceiling?
No, my actual question to the president was, look, we're beginning to build a relationship because we have not had one. And there's always got to be trust but verify. But the American public doesn't trust anyone either. So the president, I said, why don't we agree in principle of a framework? First of all, the president should lay out a plan. He says he has a plan, but the CBO can't even score it because it's just a speech. But if you lay out a plan that is scored, you lay out cuts in the current year, caps where government could not continue to grow and change in the future, and then entitlement reform. The only thing the president agreed to in the end was that we did need entitlement reform when it came to the debt limit.
Are you encouraged by what the vice president is trying to do right now? Joe Biden is meeting with Democrats and Republicans to come up with some sort of compromise. Does that look like it's gaining some steam?
That's a start, and that's a point, but the president needs to make a case to the American people here. We can't sit back and let August 2nd come here without laying out a plan. Now, early on, Geithner and the president said that there should be a clean debt limit of $2.4 trillion with no cuts or anything else. You had more than 80 Democrats join with Republicans and say no to that. Okay, so that idea is off the table. Let's sit down and have a real discussion, but let's get rid of these accounting gimmicks. Let's be honest with the American public of how we're going to change our path and get out of this problem. We can't cut our way out of this. We have to grow the economy. Look at the Dow Jones today. There needs to be a pro-growth agenda here to actually create jobs in America to have a fundamental difference.
Some of your fellow Republicans, Ron Paul of Texas, for example, the Republican presidential candidate, says, you know what, you could save $100 billion tomorrow if you just bring the troops home from Afghanistan. Now that bin Laden is dead, is that a good idea?
Well, that's a discussion that we've had. We just had a DOD vote on the floor. We'll have a discussion here about Libya as well this week. So there's a lot of discussion on where we're going, on where we're spending our money, but it doesn't just go just to military as well. It goes throughout of wherever we're going. But if we cut all of discretionary spending, our budget's roughly $3.5 trillion, and we borrow $1.5. You could cut all discretionary. That means the military, all the cabinets, and everywhere else, and we would still need to borrow money. That means that you have 10,000 people retiring every day, these baby boomers, and if you don't get a handle on it, it's going to grow each and every year. And every year they ignore the problem, it just gets worse.
Are you ready to cut, though, hundreds of billions of dollars a year in defense spending?
Well, if you look at the Republicans, when we laid out our H.R. 1, we did cut defense. We put everything on the table. We'd be more than willing to lay out. Republicans have laid out a plan. I believe as president who is asking us to raise this debt limit, he should first lay out a plan that has no accounting gimmicks, that lays out to the American public that the Congressional Budget Office could actually score it, and we can start the discussion. That would be a work in a good direction to how to start with.
Congressman McCarthy, thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for holding this hearing. I just want you to know I fully support this legislation redressing the man-made drought in California. For too long, government regulations put fish over farmers and people. Just in my county alone, in Kern County, we've lost more than 375 acre-feet of water from the state project in recent years. And when you think of what just transpired last month with Governor Brown declaring an end to California's drought, we have 165% of snowpack, but farmers won't be getting 100%. To use an analogy that even the Kern County Water Agency uses, that's like a company having its best profits ever, but telling its employees they're going to get 80% of their paycheck. It's just unacceptable and unheard of. That is why I'm honored to introduce Jim Beck, the General Manager of the Kern County Water Agency. Jim has been at the table and fighting for Kern County and local farmers' water interests for 28 years. As the head of the second largest agency in the state water project, Jim has a detailed first-hand knowledge of water policy in the state and is consistently working to ensure our farmers get the water they are entitled to and pay for. Water in Kern County supports millions of acres of farmland in my district that produce over $3.5 billion in agricultural goods annually. Jim also plays an integral part in ensuring coordination between the state and the Central Valley Project so farmers and residents are not left high and dry. Mr. Chairman, I give you Jim Beck. Yield back.
You heard from the Speaker and the leader on the facts of what are out there. One of the things, when you look at the jobs report, you sit back and wonder why. You saw a Keynesian view of more government spending from a stimulus to a QE1 and QE2. Not only did the voters disagree with it, now the numbers have disagreed with it. Today, it takes the average unemployed 39.7 weeks to find a job. You have been 28 straight months with unemployment above 8%. You look back and wonder why. It's been more than 750 days, and the Democrats have not passed a budget. Why would you wait without a long-term plan? This is a time for Harry Reid. This is a time for the President to put the partisanship aside and put the country first. There are a number of bills the House Republicans have passed to roll back regulations, to focus on small business. 70% of all new jobs start through small business. Let's put people before politics, and let's put this country back to work.